Welcome back. CyberSpace. Empirical Training. Do you know what I mean? So they're like Empirical Training. Welcome back to the CyberSpace podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the CyberSpace podcast by Empirical Training. My name's Josh. I'm 1/4 of Empirical Training, and joined today, we have a full house. I've got all 4 pieces of Empirical Training. Myself, Josh, Product Specialist, Product Strategist, former Security Analyst. We've got Vaughan. Do you want to introduce yourself, or I'm happy to do it for you?
Yeah, if I can introduce myself. Hello, everyone. Vaughan here, current SOC leader, and as the guys like to call me, the AI specialist.
Yeah, the AI guy. AI guy.
The AI specialist. Do a lot with automations. Currently work for an AI-based cybersecurity startup, looking to automate the SOC analyst, and that's what my expertise lies.
And that's why we think he's an expert, because he's responsible about how he uses AI. He doesn't go and promise the world in these fancy buzzwords. He's definitely not in marketing. So Vaughan is dealing with the forefront of automation and AI as it applies to cybersecurity. But we aren't really there with that kind of AI complete take over the world type level stuff yet, and nobody is. So hence why he hedges his bets and doesn't like to call it AI. Robbie, do you want to go next?
Hello, everybody. Robbie Steele here, ex-SOC manager, now SOC technical consultant.
Ooh.
Created my own job title, which is interesting. I guess when you work in the industry for long enough, you just get to make up your own titles. Happy to be here, full squad.
They are just titles, aren't they? The only these days people say, "Oh, I need a new title," because people aren't listening to me. That's the only time I've heard anyone try and change their title when they need just it to look a little bit more proper in the emails or the Teams chats. So, cheers, Robbie. Cheers, Vaughan. And AJ, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sounds good. Hello, everyone. I'm AJ. Good to be back with the boys, or Andrew Jones, or Andy. There's a few names that fly around, to be fair, on social.
I've got a few more.
And there's probably Bus Boy that came up in a couple of the podcasts. But yeah, I've been in cybersecurity for 8 years, and now I'm an incident response. Well, I say specialist, but I'm okay at it. But specialist is in the title, so that makes it sound like I'm really good. But I'm not
proven.
Yeah,
yep. Again, these are the cool heads you want when natural incident occurs, not somebody who walks in thinking that the sun shines out of their behind and they are the specialist, somebody who's going to pragmatically work with you. But as someone who's worked alongside AJ, I'll tell you, he is a specialist. He always has been, and now he's leading from the front in his incident response teams, keeping your crypto secure. Right? That's not too much information.
Yeah, don't say the company name. That's enough. That's enough.
Hands are up. Great. So we've also probably worth talking that we are doing this live podcast again. This is our second live podcast. So if you do hear us talk to the chat, that's them. Say hello, chat. I don't know if it will appear up on screen, but maybe we can put a banner across if someone puts a comment in. But we'll be taking these people's feedback, these questions. A really great way to engage beyond just the 4 of us, right? So if we didn't explain something well enough, or somebody has a really interesting point, they're going to trigger us to go down a few rabbit holes. So really looking forward to a bit of engagement, as much as you can spare on the other side of your screen, because I'm sure people have got this up while they might be studying or doing something else. But we're Empirical Training. We are democratizing cybersecurity knowledge, trying to make it accessible to everybody, whether that is people wanting to go about their everyday lives, feel a little bit more secure, maybe avoid that scam that you're hearing about, or those dodgy texts you get from certain princes from certain geographical regions in the world. Or maybe you are looking to get into cybersecurity. We've had great careers in cybersecurity so far. We're still very much on them, and we won't be quitting anytime soon, because we realize that's where we really get our value for these types of conversations, what we do on a daily basis at the forefront of cybersecurity. We want to make sure people feel comfortable and able and see a direction for them to get into cybersecurity, because it's a great career. It's not just a job. This really is a profession. You can go into, I was on a call with work today, and they started talking about why this is a noble profession and how we save lives, and a bit of a stretch, but I do think it is nice that we do kind of keep things ticking, keep things working, hospitals running, keep information clean, which actually over the last few years, elections coming up, clean information is probably some of the most important pieces, besides keeping safe critical infrastructure, because people can die because of that. So far, I'm not aware of anyone dying from misinformation, but that's probably debatable, and I can see some eyebrows already. So this podcast, because we have our chat on the live, I can already see a question come in. So I'm actually going to start this off with the question. Thanks for that, chat. But what else we're going to do as we answer these questions, we're also going to talk about things we've been discussing in our school community. So that's school with a K. Anybody who isn't a part of it and who's listening right now, I'd really encourage you to type in school empirical training on whatever search engine you use, and you'll find us there. We have a free tier and a gold tier, and we're going to cover off the pieces of information that we share within there, the little nuggets of gold, the commentary on news stories, as well as maybe some polls we do. We get some feedback from the community, because we've got like 1,500 members in there. So a fraction of our social media presence, but great, because these are people who want to be engaging in cybersecurity discussions. So gentlemen, the first question is coming from the chat. And I'm going to toss this one to whoever wants to answer first, but I know somebody who has the answer. What kind of SIEM, that's security incident and event management tool, do you use yourself at home? We talk about personal projects a lot, so I think that's where this question has come from.
Yeah, so I could jump in with this one, because I made a YouTube video last week about home projects, and the best open source one is Security Onion, but it's not, as a SIEM, it's not always the easiest to use. So one that I do like, but again, there are two that I do like, but they cost money, Azure Sentinel and Elastic SIEM. So they're both great. Use them at home, like for the trials, I would, unless you're only ingesting a small amount of data that you don't mind paying for. But again, if you want to use free open source tools, then Security Onion itself is a great solution for that, and it contains a SIEM in there as well. But sometimes, obviously, it's not a commercial tool, but some people do use it commercially. But I find the Elastic and Azure Sentinel are easier to use, but you do have to pay for them. But if you want more of a kind of clunky SIEM, if you're just using it at home, then Security Onion is probably one you can go for.
Yeah, here with the Microsoft Sentinel approach as well. That's the one I use in my corporate job day to day, and also the one that I use outside as well. So building our lab as well, I've based it off Microsoft Sentinel because that's what I'm most comfortable with. So yeah, like AJ has mentioned, it's got, I think it's a 30-day, $200 spend limit. So if you're just looking for something to go in and play around with and get acquainted to without any hard contracts or anything, Microsoft Sentinel is a great start point, especially with all its plugins and functionality that seem to be ever increasing day by day.
Yeah, that's a real popular one as well. Talk to lots of kind of customers or organizations building their security strategy. And are you familiar with E3 and E5 licenses? If I say that, yeah. So it's basically the licenses that get your Microsoft Office and Teams and all the other, because they sell everything, Microsoft anything software technology based. They now bundle in Defender for Endpoint free in E3, and then E5 is the enterprise one, the free Sentinel, free Defender XDR. So a lot of organizations want to be using that one. So it's quite a good standard to get skilled up on. But I would also say that if you learn one, you've kind of learned them all. There are nuances between them, but they're very easy to pick up. Vaughan took me through Sentinel not too long ago, and I was already starting to see the kind of links. Last comment, the open source piece. AJ, you mentioned Security Onion, right? And how it could be a bit clunky. It's open source. I'm amazed at how many orgs actually do build everything on open source, though, right? I thought it was maybe only a few entry-level organizations, but some really big ones. Wazoo is another good one, or Wazoo, I don't know how to say it, WAZUH. It's open source XDR. I know managed security companies who built their whole agent off the back of that. Acunetics, free vulnerability scanner, if you want to get a hands on looking at some of that and what a report looks like. I know enterprises who use that one and don't bother paying a Nessus or a Tenable. So yeah, there's a lot of value in these tools, even if they are free.
And I'm sure building your tooling off of open source stuff has never gone wrong before, right?
Anything to save a bit of money, eh?
Yeah. Well, I had a really good analogy from the threat intel head that I work with, who he said open source is great, but as soon as there's a problem with it, it's like ants to honey. Every hacker is able to start reverse engineering it, get their hands on it, and find the other hole. So normally, if you find one vulnerability in an open source piece, give it a couple of weeks, there'll be 10. Vulnerabilities are linked to each other, so that's some people get away with it. Some things I've not heard any vulnerabilities in, but hey. You can always harden on top of it, though, right? It's not just use it straight up as is. But for our audience, don't start hardening. Just start seeing how it works. Great. Thanks so much. Sorry.
I was going to say that's the benefit of open source, I guess, the quick improvement on the technology, which often doesn't always come with like commercial software. But yeah, again, it's all about with your home lab, like Josh says, just get some experience with it. Don't worry too much about trying to have
AJ, for the newbie then, out of all of those three that you've mentioned, which is the easiest to use with the most documentation?
To be honest, the one that I have the most experience with is actually Elastic Seam. But after seeing the training that Vaughan and Josh put together, they're extremely similar. So with Azure Sentinel, so the one I've got the most experience with is actually Splunk, which is another one we haven't spoken about, but that is really expensive and it's only companies that use that. But out of them all, I would say go with Security Onion. You're going to save yourself a lot of money. There's a lot of good documentation. Start with open source and then go and have a look at the ones which big companies are using. Like Josh mentioned, the skills transfer over anyway. So yeah, start with the Security Onion, move into Azure Sentinel with the training that we've got. And that is the one that is being used by most companies today. So that is probably the best route to go.
Yeah, and if you're also not too worried about the price tag, and I say price tag, I think Azure Sentinel, it completely depends on the amount of data that's been ingested, how much cost you're incurring, but you can probably set a log analytics workspace, an Azure Sentinel app with an agent feeding your own personal device logs in maybe about 25, 30 minutes. So if time is an element, then that's probably the one to go with.
You can set a price cap as well, couldn't you, for data consumption?
Don't
they just alert you rather than actually stop you?
Yeah, so pricing alerts it is, so it'll just notify you after a certain amount of cost is incurred. But again, it's based on of data ingestion. So one device, you're probably not looking at many terabytes of data, which is when you're going to start seeing the big costs.
That's a good message, because I remember being pretty terrified of trying my own stuff in cloud because I was so scared of the costs ramping up. It was only when I got a couple of vouchers that I realized, it actually is pennies mostly. Yeah. So get in there. Just turn it off when you're not using it. I know, Vaughan, you've left the lab environment running a few times. And
yes, and it's only charges like £5 or £6 a month, I think. Like Azure Sentinel itself is actually free to run. You only have to pay for the data that's being stored in the cloud.
And the process, right? I remember that's the other piece. But
yes, and process.
Queries,
I've been caught out there, to be fair. I set up an Elastic Seam lab and I had...
it was you?
It was me. I had all of the logs from Suricata being pumped in. The bill went up to like £300 or something like that. So I quickly shut it down.
And is Suricata's the IDS intrusion detection system?
Intrusion detection system in Security Onion, yeah. So I was pumping those logs over, generating some traffic, but there was a lot of logs being pumped in from that device. So
it's an expensive lesson, that.
Yeah, it got me a job though. that project got me a job, so I guess it was an investment.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know. That's interesting though. Suricata is actually that network packet inspection piece. That must have been, if there was traffic ongoing, it must have still captured a lot for you. But that's open source also, and I swear I don't know any competition. I know competition, but I don't know. I think that's like the gold standard as far as I'm aware, unless anyone else knows of any other IDS pieces. So it's interesting that sometimes open source is seen as, don't build that yourself, you cowboy. And other times it just rises to the top, and everyone's like, well, hey, we can't create anything better than this. I mean, Linux operating system is probably the perfect example of that, right? And all the bits that come along with that. Nice. So thank you very much for the question. Keep them coming. We're going to answer them as they go along. They can be as stupid or as clever as you like. There are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. And I think this is a safe space. Cyberspace is that safe space to ask these questions. The questions we wish we could have been asking when we were junior analysts. So I want to move us on slightly as more questions come in to any key stories that we've seen over the last, that we've shared in the school platform. And I think, AJ, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you again, because I know you shared one or two this week, and then maybe we can bring us on a conversation, just breaches in general.
Yeah, so the one that I wrote about in school was the BBC breach, and I'm trying to remember what happened. But
British Broadcasting Centre, is it for those who might think it means something else?
Corporation, is it?
Corporation.
I'm not too sure. But yeah.
Reaction on that.
We're still waiting for some exact technical details to come out, unless they've come out already, but I haven't seen any more details that have come out. But they mentioned so the BBC's information security team alerted us to a data security incident in which some BBC pension scheme records have been copied from an online data storage service. While this breach appears to have been through a third-party cloud storage provider, and any data controller under data protection laws remains primarily responsible for the security measures it adopts. So we took a lot of, so when I wrote this up on school, kind of the key takeaways to begin with, like BBC are a big corporation in the UK. Their incident response write-up was pretty poor. And I know we've spoken about this in a previous podcast, Josh, with the British Library, who had a great write-up.
In defense of BBC, it is quite early still. I think this is kind of ongoing. So I'm all for big, but I will give them a little bit more time before I say that they've handled it badly, because you might just be busy doing stuff that matters a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. The only thing I will say that they obviously have mentioned that it's through a third-party cloud storage provider, but they know some details, but they haven't really announced it themselves. That came from computing.co.uk. So it'd be interesting to know how much they do know. And
I think I know who it is. Does anyone else have seen any other data breach cloud storage linked stuff? Some of them have been a bit more transparent with what service it was. No?
I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
I think it's AWS Snowflake. So still early doors, but I was looking in the threat intel channel this morning, and we were talking about looking at indicators of compromise for this Snowflake campaign. There seems to be some sort of vulnerability in the cloud in the cloud storage service. So those who don't know, Snowflake is like it's cold storage for data, so you can like put stuff you don't really need that often, but you can access it if you need to. It's not quite the Glacier is another one they do that moves even slower, but slow storage means it's cheaper because you don't need it all the time, but you can grab it when you need it. It looks like there was some sort of breach that's, I think, hit Ticketmaster as well. And the other one I was looking at is not the NHS hospital, somebody else, some big payment person. It might be, it's not MasterCard. Let me Google. And everyone, this is a lesson. Googling on the job is fine.
Yeah, it was a Santander, I'm pretty sure.
Say it again?
It was a Santander, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, perfect. That's the one. So this is very interesting, because this is, I wouldn't call this one, supply chain has a few kind of categories, and this is definitely supply chain compromise. So supply chain, for those who might be coming to this, it's people who are involved in your kind of software supply chain. So it's a software you use to deliver other things. It's not, deliveries and stuff coming through from Amazon, because I know that is often how it's interpreted. It's the security of your software stack. So there's a vulnerability in Snowflake, which technically they don't own. That the BBC, Ticketmaster, and so on, they can only have control of how they configure it, not the kind of baseline software that it runs, patches that it runs. And so looks like there's a vulnerability in that. We are speculating at this point. We don't have all the details. And because of that, they've been compromised the data that they had, but it's their fault because they put the data there. So you see this kind of interesting paradox almost of these supply chain compromises, because you almost want to say, hey, what on earth could I have done better than that? Like, I just thought they would have handled it. But we also know everything gets compromised eventually. No software is immune to vulnerabilities or 0 days. So this does happen. So it's not good enough to kind of just put your hands up. But yeah, lots of sensitive data has been taken, and these data stealing attacks, I do feel bad because they're almost one and done, right? We talk a lot about attack sequences, and I know there's some education stuff we do at My to Kill chain and attack sequences. Normally, it takes a while to get from entry to end objectives. There are lots of steps in between, moving laterally, gaining privileges, etc. In a data stealing attack, if you've got the perfect exploit, Move It SQL is another good example. You just grab it in one go, so it almost doesn't give defenders a time to react. You had to kind of be proactive and plan for it before you knew it was even going to happen, which is obviously a lot more difficult.
Think about the amount of sensitive data the BBC has got as well. That's some serious, sourcey info. Look at like everything that they've been involved in over the years, and all their like sources and all their like journalistic data.
That's the thing. That's what it's saying. That's what it's saying here. That some of the BBC pension scheme records. So that's people who are currently working there, right? And their pension information is being released out there. So that's kind of wild, rife for financial scams.
Yeah, there are some jokes in the chats about BBC presenters who haven't behaved themselves over the years. Google that if you don't know what we're talking about. But that's a really good point.
Yeah, all the cover-ups.
Really good point you boys make, though. That because I saw the kind of that same kind of meme jokey response. But what about like their sources for like in war zones or in places like Russia? What if that data gets compromised? That's when we're really going to see the connection of a hack to actual impact in somebody's life or maybe their freedom, right? If they do get
that's
back
true.
of this, I'm speculating, but I think it's
possible,
important to connect the impacts, right? Because that's one of the big things about cybersecurity that you don't get taught in textbooks. Right? You need to explain to people why stuff matters, and examples like this is perfect. Exactly why AJ brought it up in the school community.
That could be dangerous for people, like you said, because say if there's always a journalistic correspondent in every single country that's reporting the news, they've got to get their news and information from someone. They garner sources, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of people.
Hopefully they're on Signal and they've been a bit smarter about it, or maybe other apps are available. A very BBC line for me, but yeah, we don't know what's in this Snowflake thing. But you're right. It could just be OAPs, or people haven't paid their TV license.
That's so bad as well, having to pay a TV license. I pay, by the way.
We all pay, by the way. To those who don't know, who live outside of our little island, we pay money for a TV with no adverts. You have to. It's law. If you watch it, you have to pay. It's quite an interesting system, but the idea is it maintains a kind of independent channel that isn't beholden by ads, but it doesn't always work out for them. They get a lot of fingers pointed at them for swinging too way left or right. I digress. So AJ, why did you bother sharing that story? Like, why is that helpful to our school community?
Well, I thought it was I think all these data breaches are always very interesting, but I was also trying to speculate from an incident response perspective. So again, I was trying to piece it together on previous incidents and breaches to try and understand what had happened, and then give our school community kind of the perspective from what an incident response analyst would do. So that's why I was giving some key takeaways to Denz, one of our school members, and just saying that if I was responding to this incident and it was based on, I guessed that it was potentially S3 buckets that were potentially compromised or left open to the public. But Snowflake is a new one that I need to look into. But the key takeaways were things like having alerts in place to detect publicly accessible storage devices, publicly accessible S3 buckets, and having alerts in place for maybe copying large amounts of data from cloud storage devices. So I was trying to go through the mentality of what I would do if I was responding to this incident and how I would contain it, and then attempt to improve the company's security for next time. So just some key takeaways for the members, just to see what we would do or what I would do.
I love it when you kind of think about like that, because I kind of see into your mind as the incident responder, and you had very limited data to go on or information to go on, and then you already formulated a hypothesis of what it could be with the S3 buckets. I like how you went for the kind of the most obvious one. I think when we started, we always thought it'd be the most elaborate hack, but in life experience, it's normally the stupid answer.
It is.
So now what would you do now you know that it's Snowflake, Put you on the spot. How would your incident response plan change?
Well, so this actually not Snowflake, but it's happened to me last week where I was responding to an incident or 2 weeks ago that I had no idea what was going on. So it was in a container environment. And I don't know what's the best way to explain containers. I say that they're computers inside computers.
It's not bad.
But that's as close as I can get. And I had experience with it, but I'd never had experience actually connecting to container environments and responding to incidents, especially. So when it started, it was as if I was reading another language. But so it puts you on the spot then, and you have to learn that technology to be able to respond and understand what the attackers are doing. So I would do the same in this case. I'd have to learn what Snowflake is. I'd have to understand the ways that you can compromise Snowflake, and then try and use those indicators then to detect where the breach started and where it's currently gone to. But yeah, it would be a learning curve, to be fair. So that's when you said Snowflake, I only knew about it. I Googled it, but then I remembered one of our school members actually responded to the Ticketmaster post, and he mentioned Snowflake. But that's why I wasn't too sure what you mentioned, because he says from a second look, it might not be completely Snowflake's fault. I wasn't quite sure what he meant there.
Let me link me that post. Let's have a conversation with that person. Isn't on the chat. If they are, make themselves known, because I haven't found that piece yet.
I think it's important to raise as well that there are situations that will come up 8-9 years into your cybersecurity tenure where you're faced with something that you've never seen before, and it's absolutely okay that you potentially don't have a set of knowledge in that particular area, and you're allowed to have the time to be able to figure it out, and you use the skills and experience that you do have to try and like form an opinion on where to take that specific scenario.
Yeah, because that was one of the big things in that container incident, that I knew I had to contain and eradicate, and I identify, contain and eradicate, but I just had to figure out how. And it took a little bit longer than I would have liked to, but again, it was something that I felt quite bad that I didn't know, but I reached out to the other team members, and it just happened that they were also in the same boat, which was quite nice. But it just meant that we collectively had to figure it out together, instead of me, because I was handed over the incident, instead of just sitting there for like a couple of hours trying to figure it out. I was never going to do it on my own. So I just raised it to the rest of the team, and we all jumped on a call and managed to figure it out. So yeah, there's always going to be stuff you don't know. It's just, now I do know.
I was going to ask Rob that question. What would you do if somebody came over and said, "I don't know anything about this"? But you kind of answered it there, that it's normal. I think if AJ had rushed and just started doing the things that he says for on-premise environments, treating it as if it was a standalone server instead of a container, would we have the same outcome? Would his remediation have been effective, or containment? Those things matter. So speed is really important in defense, in cybersecurity defense, but accuracy is more important, right? So take the extra time to do the right thing. And yeah, I think it's we've all have a bit of a watershed moment, right? When you get the veterans in the SOC coming up to you and saying, "I don't know about anything about this either," and you're kind of like, it's like the floodgates open. You're like, none of us know everything.
That's a feel-good moment in a weird type of way, but you all pull together and you just get it done, and that's strength in numbers.
Yeah, definitely a camaraderie element. Here's a question then. In terms of the long-term implications of this Snowflake vulnerability, how do we see that going? And also, where does the responsibility matrix lie between Amazon and the customer? Is there a scenario where the vulnerability will get resolved and it'll never be seen again? Is it possible that there'll still be some elements or containers, for example, that have this vulnerability in 4, 5, 6 years? Where do we think the long-term implications are?
That's a really good question. And also because we can see if we were right further down the line, because there's a lot we don't know. There's more we don't know right now than we do. I mean, we only just realized it was Snowflake, and then somebody said this might not be all Snowflake's fault. So I wish they were here to answer that question. But yeah, it's the shared responsibility model that you look at is, what, say, a cloud provider is responsible for and what you're responsible for. Snowflake is platform as a service, so there is more stuff that's taken away by them. But then I'm also wondering, did people make their expose the console out over the internet, the admin console, and not put anything through there? So it'll depend. But even so, is there any kind of recourse for if it was completely Amazon's fault? Say, for example, they did a irresponsible bug. Bugs happen all the time. We kind of expect that. I don't think you can kind of say, now you pay half of our fine. No, the lawyers probably got involved way before that when they were signing up your
Amazon buying a bunch of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Was anyone else think any thoughts on that? It's a tough one.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, like you said, bugs happen all of the time. I feel like AWS would say that you're using our services. There must be some clause there to say if there is a bug in our systems, that you have to take some responsibility for that as well. Yeah. But if it's a 0 day, then I don't know. But yeah, actually, have a look at this post, Josh. I don't know if you want me to read it, because this might actually lean more to being the not Amazon's fault.
Yeah, so, read out for the audience. I can see it, but you go.
The response to one of our posts then. So this is what they've said. So from a second look, it might not be completely Snowflake's fault. More the threat actors farmed credentials than targeted Snowflake services that didn't have MFA associated with them, just highlighting how important a proper MFA approach is. Where possible, use an authenticator app. These aren't 100% secure, but you could use something like Pegasus to bypass it all. But that's a hell of a lot better than mobile MFA. Even better, use something you have. It's not officially announced what happened, but a few more people speculate. So again, it's more speculation.
Shout out the other Andrew.
Yeah,
Response.
that is a well-written response as well. And bloody hell, it's MFA again. You know, I said, oh, Andy, you jumped to the most obvious example. Turns out there was an even more obvious explanation, and that's a credential attack without any MFA. So yeah, if that is the case, and he didn't provide the link, but I imagine from the indicators of like compromise I saw this morning that we were testing on our customer base, I didn't see any stuff about exploits, just IP addresses. So it would align to be that this is just a credential compromise attack, and so you can look in from dodgy logins from those pieces. But yeah, that is disappointing, and in that case, it is not Snowflake's fault at all, because every idiot and their dog should know you do MFA, you do good password protections, password policies, or that's how majority of all breaches happen, right?
But then, yeah, so we'll keep you updated. Again, this is all speculation, but I don't know, that his answer does seem like it is pointing in the right direction. And we've seen it before. Like we say, the obvious stuff is usually the most accurate. But yeah, we'll keep you updated. So if you're in our school community, then that is the best place to keep updated with it.
Nice. Great. And my one was going to be, because I was kind of piggyback off that on top of the breaches I'd seen, and I hadn't made the connection that they were all linked, because I didn't see mention of Snowflake in the BBC one, and it was only as you were talking, because yeah, the Santander was the one that I was looking at. We have a few financial services customers who really care. They seem to only care when other financial services are compromised. Interesting bit of psychology that often people are like, as long as we're better than our competitors, I don't care if we're not that good. You know, it's that's where they want to sit. They don't want to have the best security. They just want to have just a little bit above the average for other people in their industry. That seems to be what I've gleaned over the last few years. Gents, is there any other comments on this piece, or any other posts you want to kind of move us on to? Because I mean, love this conversation. I found out a lot more about it, and thanks for Andrew. This kind of shows why, even if you're isolated on your own, you don't have to have a room to talk to people. You can talk about these things online, and it's really interesting because we all draw from each other and kind of get to kind of consensus on what may have happened. And half of the fun is kind of getting there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just on that point, no, I'm enjoying the conversations. What we got next?
Well, we got what have we put in recently? So we've got a lot of the introducing myself. I will also say the people who have give feedback on the materials they use in there. So I'm looking at one saying enjoying SOC Masterclass. It's great.
I've seen that. Yeah,
I love that one, because just getting value, but also enjoying it is nice to see, because we put a lot of stuff on the school. To be honest, being a community and a place to talk. Some people, that's all they use it for. Some people in there are quite experienced security analysts, which, you know, that Andrew number 2 may well have been from his comment. But we also have classroom content ranging from free stuff to, if you actually do want to kind of get your entry-level junior SOC analyst role, we've got a whole course that is kind of completely targeted at that role, which has been where we all started off. So it's nice to hear that people are using it, and when they give us feedback, I would also don't mind bad feedback, right? We've pivoted a few times, haven't we, Jen? So I had arguments in calls like this without an audience about what we should change and what we should do.
We also had some good feedback from Ed Begg as well, saying that he's took the time to watch all the videos and now watched AJ explain the skills matrix. It may seem a bit over the top, but wow, what a document. Vaughan created that document as well, so he's you want to give him the credit, mate. But yeah, great feedback. We love the feedback as well. Keep the positive feedback coming.
And yeah, constructive criticism too. We want to hear all of it.
Yeah, we'll take everything as long as it's not too nasty. It'll hurt my feelings. I do get a bit upset sometimes. I bite back on socials.
We have had to calm Robbie down in a WhatsApp group a few times before he deletes everything. It's never been that bad. But hey, no, it's great, and I negative feedback is also helpful. It's all helps us shape to make sure we're going the right way. Whatever it is, say I did the solo podcast last week. If you hated just listening to my voice for 40 minutes, tell me, and I'll make sure I've always got somebody to bounce off. Things like that is valuable. Now, the next post I want to talk about, so I'm just scrolling through, doing this quite organically. If anyone else wants to scroll and queue some up, by all means, go ahead. But the UK
I was going to say, before you moved on to that, Pierre, we've had a couple of comments in the chat. Pierre
sorry.
has mentioned, because we mentioned multi-factor authentication, but he's linked to an article where multi-factor authentication can be hacked. So yeah, that is one great point, that even if the Snowflake users did have multi-factor authentication in place, there is a chance that it was bypassed. But yeah, there's a great article if anybody's interested. It's called expertinsights.com. Can multi-factor authentication be hacked? And there's a few different methods here, such as SIM swapping, MFA prompt bombing. That's not one that I've seen before. So
that one.
It's obviously something that we say it's always good to have it set up as a precaution anyway, but you never know, it could be bypassed. So
and another one as well. One of my colleagues at my corporate job also run through a demo of bypassing MFA in Azure and Microsoft as well, which I was pretty impressed with. So yeah, a lot of places are susceptible, which just makes you think. AJ, I saw you post just now in our school community mentioned about YubiKeys. Maybe there'll be a time and a place in the not so distant future that'll become the new normal, some sort of physical biometric authentication. But yeah, who knows?
Well, it is the norm for a lot of organizations, particularly financial services. I think, AJ, your work requires you have a token, a hard token. The one I don't like is because it's something you have, something you know, and something you are is a third one, which is biometrics, which I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I wouldn't do Ancestry now or any of those things either. I'm sure we're not going to get cloned or have like genetic diseases targeted on certain, bit of genetic information. But I've been around enough tinfoil hat people that makes me think twice that, hey, it's not worth knowing what percentage Algerian I am.
So somebody will come around your house and chop your finger off and keep it in an ice bag or something, so they can use it.
Yeah. So the MFA prompt bombing I want to jump back to, because actually I love it when smart and dumb just intercept this perfect moment, right? Because
this MFA fatigue attack is the same thing.
Exactly that. Yeah. So it's hey, we can't think of any elaborate exploit. Like Vaughan, was that Azure one? Was that something a bit smart? Maybe.
Yeah, that was like a bypass of MFA using some nifty techniques.
So I actually did an exploit to kind of circumvent. Great. I love that stuff. Well, but this is, how about if we just spam them saying Outlook wants as a request to sign in? I'm not sure if it is Outlook, but click yes. If you spam them enough times, somebody who wants to use their phone, because it pops up, right? It can pop up on the main screen. Well, eventually just click yes because they can't be bothered. That works. And it's shameful that it works, but it does. I think we've gone a bit wiser to it now, and there's limits of how many times you can force the request through now. But a lot of these techniques, look at the SIM card swapping. People seen Mr. Robot? Is it Mr. Robot? iRobot? Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot, yeah.
Yeah. I think, Rob, you introduced that to me when I started working in the SOC, but brilliant show. All accurate attacks as well. And they do SIM card swapping in there. So I think it's a lot harder these days. I don't know if you've tried to do a pay-as-you-go contract anymore. It's a lot more information required, so you can't just kind of create all these fake numbers.
I was watching some YouTube videos not that long ago talking about like young people doing SIM swapping and bolting into like a Vodafone shop or an AT&T shop and stealing the iPads that they've got on the desk, and then they're like quickly swapping over the numbers to their own, and then obviously that's their way of getting into somebody's Bitcoin wallet or whatever. But yeah, wow. I think they're wising up to it. No.
Yeah, it's cat and mouse, but they always get to go first. And in the game of chess,
yeah, I've heard about that one as well. They're all in like a Telegram channel, and they've got different teams, haven't they? And one team is the guys that will run in and steal the tablet, and then they'll take it out and they'll bring it to the tech guy. It's very much like a heist, and then the tech guy then will swap the SIM, and then they'll pass it to somebody else then who'll try and clear the funds out of the account, and then launder the money and stuff like that.
And we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, for this episode anyway, because otherwise we're going to run way beyond the allocated time for people who want to listen to this. But it's really great to have all 4 of the Empirical trainers on one pod together again. It's been a while. We don't always get availability for all 4 of us, and really enjoyed talking about what we are sharing with our community, the kind of news stories that we put out there, the commentary, also live kind of working out exactly what's going on, because there's always an element of this. They never really tell you everything in the news. You have to kind of glean what you can from the information that is shared and follow multiple sources, right? It's basically open source intelligence when you're trying to work out exactly what's going on with the cyber attack that's in the news, and what kind of intelligence is out there that we could actually apply to lessons learned or to actually ongoing compromises. In this case, the Snowflake breach that we talked about. I know that there are a lot of people who use Snowflake, and a lot of people are worried about this right now and investigating, digging back through logs, threat hunting, looking at network packets to work out, have we got any signs of compromise here? Hopefully it hasn't got to us yet, would be what they're thinking. But as we also pointed out, we speculate it may well be MFA. So, hey, hopefully they just have got MFA enabled, and they can be confident that their instance won't be compromised as such. But we'll hold tight. We'll still got a lot more to come out about that news story. It'll be interesting to see how it develops, and we can look back and see, were we correct on our assessment, or were we kind of barking up the wrong tree? A few red herrings sent us a few ways. So hopefully that was really helpful. It's great to have the chat engage with us in this one as well. We don't always do it with a live chat, but when we do, there's some great comments and questions in there, and actually it makes it a lot more fun as well. So thank you very much for everyone participating there. The next person to thank is you. Thank you so much for listening to these. It really does help us feel that there's a reason that we're doing this. Kind of people who join in the community saying that they find value from the stuff that we talk about, making cybersecurity a little bit more accessible, trying to rip down some of the barriers to entry that people may feel they're there, or that may actually be there as well, try and make it more accessible, because we really do think this is a great career to have. It's a great space to be in. There is so much opportunity within cybersecurity, and it's certainly not going away. Everybody needs this. It's almost as essential as things like energy. Maybe that's a bit of a leap, but hey, I think we'll get there. And then cybersecurity kind of secures energy systems as well. So hey, there's the link. Maybe it wasn't too much of a stretch. So yeah, if you do want to kind of get more involved with us, please, you can comment, engage with us on the comments. We'll try and come back to you. But if you really want to make sure you get our attention, head over to school.com. That's school with a K /cybersec, or you can search Empirical Training and School with a K, and you'll find our community. Now we have a free tier where you can join our other 1,000+ community members. We're constantly talking about new cybersecurity stuff. We love the engagement. We love the feedback, regardless of whether you're starting out in your cybersecurity journey or whether you are a cybersecurity professional. We have both people in there. And we also have some stuff available if you do want to begin your cybersecurity career, but you need a little bit of mentorship. You need a little bit of guidance on what stuff is actually going to get you that job, what is actually valuable, what is actually applicable to your role if you get that first job. That's where we've kind of come in, and we've built a course that ultimately would make anyone who does that course a better junior analyst than we were when we first started out. And we ended up being pretty good analysts as we kind of got to know it. But there's a lot of learning on the job. So this is trying to make sure that we're better equipped if we were looking back on ourselves, so that you can hit the ground running and really excel, get past those first hurdles of the interviews, get your first job. And from there, the world really is your oyster. There's so many different avenues you can move from a SOC role into threat intelligence, into sales, into product, into forensics, into consultancy. There's a lot of opportunities out there. So thank you very much for listening. I've been Josh. This has been Empirical Training's podcast, CyberSpace. On the call today, we've had Robbie, AJ, and Vaughan, the other 3 parts of Empirical Training. And thank you very much for listening. We hope to see you next time. And Robbie isn't here, so I'll say it. That's a wrap.
I think that might be it. I think that's a wrap.
CyberSpace podcast.
Empirical Training. You guys are cyber nerds. Do you know what I mean? So like